Coruscant is the sort of the home planet of the Republic at this point. It's the center planet. It's basically a planet made entirely of cities.
Since there's really no locations you can go shoot, everything you see has to be fabricated. And it was a combination of partial sets and a lot of miniatures and computer graphics, matte paintings, kind of every technique we could throw at it.
It was an interesting design challenge in the sense that, how do you create this world that's completely built out and yet still make it kind of, attractive so that it becomes the symbol of power in the Republic? Where you start to look not sort of at an individual building level, but at a planetary level, where you start really looking at it and treating each city as if it was one particular building and how would it flow out.
We had experimented a little bit with the look of Coruscant, actually, for one of the end shots of the Return of the Jedi Special Edition. We have a series of vignettes of celebrations happening, and one of them is a little glimpse of Coruscant.
So what we did was we started to go with monumental styles, architecture that we're very familiar with, stone architecture, classic architectures, forms that we're very familiar with in New York. Taking those forms and then literally multiplying them by 1,000, if not more, and just exaggerating the scale. What you're seeing rings familiar, but yet the scale is of such a crazy proportion that it kind of makes your jaws drop and say, wow, this society must be pretty amazing to build structures of this scale.
A major feature of the planet is this constant strings of flying traffic. So everywhere you look, there's these lanes of flying cars. Weren't real hard to do. Probably about 20 or so different vehicle designs with color variations in them, and they're assembled into lanes of traffic, and then those lanes of traffic got reused over and over again, going different directions. We would do occasional sweeteners. When you saw crossed strings of traffic, we would animate a couple of vehicles that would change lanes, go from one string to another. So you can occasionally see that in the background. Probably the biggest challenge dealing with Coruscant is getting enough variety. You don't want to see the same building over and over again. You want to see consistent architectural themes, but it needs to look like every building is unique. There were probably about 24 different distinct 3D models that we built, buildings that were repurposable, that you could take pieces off of them and assemble them in different ways, and that turned 90 degrees, it would look a little bit different, or you could have lights on one and not on another, and those got painted on top of to make more complete skylines.
One of the really fun environments to design was the Jedi Temple. George wanted something very monumental, but he also wanted something very spiritual. And so we came up with the idea that it was going to be these 5 giant towers, and the Jedi Council being in the top of the very center one. It's in some ways almost religious. And if you think about it, you have this vast planet, and yet the Jedi Temple is on top of that, and they have the highest point looking down. The counterpoint, that the Senate chamber was going to be more like a big mushroom dome, and then it's all internal. Everything is on the inside part of it. And so you have these two contrasting forms, a very vertical, sort of spiritual aerial place, countered with the sort of a dome, almost cave-like environment for the Senate chamber.
One of my favorite things about the Coruscant scenes are at night when you see way off in the distance. We did this nice heat shimmer effect that you see in big cities. Heat shimmer that would be visible as a twinkling of the lights, and we did that in the nighttime scene in the Jedi Council chamber, the landing platform when they depart to head back home. And then there's a nighttime scene in Palpatine's apartment that we put that in. I was pleased with how that effect turned out, and it did a lot to help add depth to the backgrounds. The Palpatine's apartment set was notable just because it was the very first thing we shot on the first day of principal photography on Episode 1.
Good luck, everybody. Now let's kick ass. 77, take 1.
And action!
So after a gap from 1982 to 1997, that was our first rolling of cameras on Star Wars.